Hi, this is Blake Bettner, Managing Editor of Worn and Wound.
And I'm Thomas Callara, Editor at Worn and Wound.
Today, we're looking at the Citizen Promaster Dive Automatic Super Titanium. If that didn't narrow it down for you, it is the reference NB602168L. I think the Promaster Dive Automatic is a very broad collection. It's a very diverse collection. But today we are looking at a watch that has been heavily anticipated. You might popularly call it the Challenge Dive, or the Fujitsubo, or the Barnacle.
Right.
It goes by many names. But what it is kind of their modern, classic, vintage-inspired, you name it, dive watch that seems like a direct shot across the bow at Seiko.
Yeah.
Of course, Citizen is no stranger to dive watches. You have a pretty great one on your wrist.
Yep.
I have one that from my own collection right here that I'm rather fond of. But this watch is a different vein than either of these. This is kind of an everyday wear watch. Before we get into it, though, the name of this thing.
Yeah.
So the reference NB602168L doesn't exactly roll off the tongue.
No, it doesn't.
So this watch is, as I mentioned, called the Barnacle, or the Fujitsubo, which is the Japanese word for barnacle. Why is that?
Well, I believe the story goes is that this diver was actually washed up ashore in Australia, and there was barnacle formations around the watch, but after they had gotten all that barnacle formation off, the watch was still running, as the legend goes. So yeah.
So it earned the nickname the Barnacle.
Right.
So that's what this watch is based on. So it's a pretty, I would call it kind of a timeless, classic, traditional looking dive watch. We have another watch right here, the Seiko SPB 149, which we talk about quite often around here. It's a watch that we're all very fond of. This seems to live in the same vein as this, and this seems like Citizen's way of saying, hey, we have one of those that we made back then. It's popular for reasons that you just described.
Right.
Let's bring it back, and they've done it in this rendition here with a blue dial and a blue bezel. It also comes in a black dial and black bezel version. We have it on a NATO right here. However, it comes on a bracelet. It can also be had on a rubber tropic style strap. The big difference here compared to the Seiko is it's all titanium. Scratch that. Super titanium. This is disconcertingly light. This watch is very, very light. I have a scale over there. We'll weigh them together in a minute. But this watch is even on the bracelet. It feels like it's barely even there. I don't know where you fall on titanium. Is this a feel that you appreciate? Do you like the lightness?
I do. And recently I was on a Citizen trip when they had we were reviewing the Promaster collection, and just having this watch in hand, it's very light. To the point where it's just kind of like what am I kind of like holding here? And again, just compared to the Seiko SPB here. But yeah, it's I'm a fan of titanium. And again, like to your point, you were saying that this is more of a traditional take, and if you kind of take a look at their line of Promaster divers, this kind of stands out as more of the everyday, simple, kind of not out there kind of. Yeah,
it's kind of the what you think of as the kind of modern skin diver kind of rendition.
Exactly.
Now we're both pretty big fans of Citizen. These are our watches. I like it when Citizen strays into these kind of like weird territory. The Aqualand here has the depth gauge arm kind of sticking off the side. The case of this thing is, well, just look at it. What do you even call this thing? I don't know. But I love it. I love it when Citizen stays in this end of things. So this, to me, was almost jarring to see this released, and not in a bad way. I think it certainly has a lot going for it. I was really excited when I first saw images of this watch. I think it's a great design, and I like seeing them bring it back in hand. I have a few issues with it, though. Overall, I think it is a great looking watch. It looks great in pictures. On wrist, it really disappears, as we mentioned. But getting down to the details here, first off, the case here is titanium. It's a very soft case. There are no hard lines or hard edges to it. It's almost kind of an organic feeling in nature. And one of the issues that I find with it is this bezel assembly here. So as you see from the kind of side-on view, it's fully polished, and it kind of looks like aluminum that's been kind of molded around a shape. I don't think it quite jives with the case as well as I'd like. That leads into one of the other kind of issues that I have with the watch, which is the bezel insert here. Now this is also aluminum, I imagine. It's got kind of an unpleasant sound. It sounds like maybe it's hollow. What I do like though, the numerals here and the printing on the dial, it has this like fat font effect, which reminds me of like old submariners that would pad print on the bezels, and as the pad would wear out, the font would get a little bit fatter and fatter until they would change it. So this kind of has that vibe to me, which I really enjoy. But it's a very smooth, very reflective texture, which, you know, compared to the Seiko, has kind of a brush, like a radially brushed, and then the numerals are inset there.
Yeah.
This just feels
matted
yeah, it feels a bit more sophisticated here, and likewise the actual bezel assembly that you're grabbing onto and turning integrates with the case, I would say, in a much cleaner way.
Yeah, I mean, and in the bezel, it has good action. But to your point, just kind of like how it feels, I would have liked a little more, more of like
slippery.
More of like a tactile feeling here. You know, I do agree with you as well. It you know, you mentioned that the case is soft. Like the bezel has this like softness to it, where you kind of want something a little more sharper, more grippier,
a little confident, a little more confidence inspiring.
But that doesn't, you know, mess with any of the action of the bezel. The bezel works like it should. The
feeling is great, and this is getting like a little nitpicky here, of course, but it's not that far off in price from the Seiko, so I think it's a worthy comparison to make. The other comparison that I wanted to point out is the crown, the size of the crown here. So boy, I don't know, maybe it's like 60 to 70% the size of the Seiko. So it's a bit harder to grab onto and manipulate. Again, a very small thing, but something that I noticed right off the bat. Even not comparing it to the Seiko, it just kind of feels a bit too small for the case, and visually as well.
Right.
So, you know, I guess that's a good segue maybe into the movement. This is a watch that's using the 90-51 movement, which is rated at like -10 plus 20 seconds a day. I think a little over 40 hours of reserve. And this is a movement that we find in use in quite a few watches within Citizen's realm. So
it's pretty standard, right?
Yep, no issue there at all. It has the date function there at 3 o'clock. It gets a white frame around it. I don't know how I feel about that, but it's there. So,
and also the lume to the right side of the
of the date there. I know Seiko started doing that on these to meet the ISO certification. So that leads us into the dial here. I think I generally really enjoy this dial design. It is pretty similar to the Seiko here. I don't know, it works. It's got the Mercedes hour hand. It's got the kind of hollow section underneath that. It's kind of a funky dial to take in.
Yeah. And like I said, it's in a way it's funky because it's more of like a traditional looking design for Citizen, right? And I like it. I like that they went this route for this watch. Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, the markers look great. I mean, they're thick, bold, you know, very legible, and again against this blue dial, and even on the black dial version as well. So I dig that. And and you did mention the hollow hand, which is a nice little touch there as well.
Which is cool. Yeah, it's funky. One thing that I do notice though on closer look, the hour markers don't look like they're applied. It almost looks like they're like pressed into the dial, because you can kind of see how the dial curves up to meet them. So it almost looks like it was kind of stamped all as that shape. You know, where the Seiko, it really looks like those hour markers were they're actual pieces that were applied to the dial. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but it's just something that I noticed that you will catch in certain light. Another thing worth noting is the crystal here, which is a sapphire crystal, It has this kind of a chamfer that goes underneath. It has the appearance of kind of going underneath the bezel there. I don't know if there's a purpose to that.
Right, and then it does, like, it's pretty flat in a way, right? I mean,
very
it's
flat. Yeah, there's no dome there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it doesn't read as like, oh, this is a vintage inspired dive watch. I mean, this feels like a dive watch that, you know, it feels kind of modern. Maybe it's just become such a ubiquitous design that we kind of view it as, well, that's not a, you know, this is kind of a design that's been around for a long time, and it still works just as well today as it did back then. It's still effective. So, okay, so the case is 41 millimeters in diameter. You can see the case kind of bows out a little bit there. Let's get a thickness reading on this thing. It's only 12 millimeters thick, and you know, I think that is owed a bit to the flat crystal there. And the lug to lug measurement is, let's see here, 49, so it's just squeaking in under 50 millimeters. It feels about the same dimensions as the Seiko, but a little bit bigger, and you definitely kind of notice that a little bit. But since it's titanium, obviously it's much lighter.
Right.
All right, let's get this sucker on the scale. All right, so let's start out with, this is just the head of the Citizen. Clocks in 54 grams. Let's compare this to just the head of the Seiko, 84. Yeah. So it's a pretty noticeable difference, and you definitely feel that. Yeah. I feel like the bracelet barely adds anything on the wrist too. Yeah. So overall, I find this is a very interesting watch. It doesn't tempt me as much as when I first saw it visually. I think it's a beautiful watch. I like that they're making it. The execution, I think, could be tightened up in a few areas here. And then I think it would really kind of put it into the square territory of this Seiko SPB, which is quite popular. So overall, I hope they keep iterating on it. I'm glad that Citizen is doing this. It's a little bit cheaper, as I mentioned. I think it is around $975 on the bracelet, if I'm not mistaken. So whereas the Seiko is around $1,100 or something in that realm. So again, really like the watch. Execution-wise, could use a little work.
Yeah, and again, I mean, if you're just in the market for something a little different when it comes to your traditional looking dive watch, right? It's just fun. It's just fun to, like, when you just pick this watch up and it's just like, okay, this is kind of different than your normal like, steel divers. Overall, really cool watch. Happy Citizen is making it. We have a full review on this watch now live on Worn and Wound. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time.